Hey everyone, welcome back to the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society of America YouTube channel.
America.
America, as you can tell, we're feeling very American today. Actually, this is like we're on an American roll this week. Tonight we're going to be uncorking our brand new USA Exclusive Cask, bottled for Society members on America, and chosen specifically for the birthday of America, Independence Day. So
It's a big one.
it's a big one. We were here. Well, Charlie, you weren't here. Scott and I were here on the channel a couple nights ago doing a pretty American themed, tasting, which was 3 American whiskeys. I've recycled my America lighting background for this stream, and you're on location, right? Your usual home bar is nowhere to be seen.
It's nowhere to be found. I am instead in America. No, I'm always in America, but I have taken the opportunity to come visit my parents in Florida. So I am now in South Florida, and I'm doing a little bit of an impromptu version. No sweet background. I only have the bottles I need, but luckily the bottles I have are still spectacular and exciting, and I get to do a little tasting with my family too. So it's all going to be good down here in Florida.
Very nice, very nice. Well, yeah, we're looking forward to this one. It won't be that long of a stream. Of course, we're just uncorking one whiskey. Typically, we'll do at least 3 to 5 whiskeys on these when we preview our out turn. But we got one tonight, which we're pretty excited for. And first, just a quick shout to everyone. First, Duke McHale says good evening. Duke was the first one in the chat. Good to see you, Duke. Whiskey Franco's back. Good to see you again. Hello and good evening, folks. A lot of good evenings. And Sean Spieth comments, it was so hard to refrain from buying those B7 bottles during the sale yesterday. Well, I hear you. I felt that way, but there's always another fish. I don't want to say a bigger fish, but that's a good thing about the society. It's like, man, we always have new things rolling out. So maybe this is something up your alley. But glad you've enjoyed those in the past. So Stuart,
this is an exciting one.
You're excited? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to jump in because you were saying it's not typical that we just do a one whiskey tasting, but looking forward to this one, not really knowing what to expect aside from what's on the stat sheet here. I think it's one that deserves the full attention of an evening. Like, I'm actually excited that we can just sit down, take as much time with this as we need, dig in as deep as we need to dig in. And we've got this whole cask for our US members, right? So it's something that, I think it's a really special one. It's for a special occasion. It's super exciting. And I don't know. It's going to be good, I think.
Yeah, so we will. That's a good point. I think we'll go as deep in this dive as everyone here would like us to. I mean, I think Charlie and I would probably be able to do that with subconsciously without really being conscious of the time that goes by. But we won't, it won't take forever. But yeah, we'll introduce it. We'll get into it. There's a lot to talk about, I think, because there have been some similar casks recently, and I think for us, and as our members understand too, of course, although we might bottle whiskeys from same distilleries, similar cask types, no two single casks are ever alike. And I think that was really accentuated a couple nights ago when we did that B7, the bourbon tasting. Scott and I, all 3 bourbons from the same distillery, different mash bills, but man, they were like totally different whiskeys. So anyway, that's just our motto is not to judge the whiskey by its cover and judge it by the liquid. And of course, we'll do that tonight. Have you tried this one yet?
So I tried it probably about 2 weeks ago, and then I took a tiny sip of it just because I was so excited, and then I put it away. I haven't tried it again since. So I didn't even take notes. I didn't try and bias my opinions anyway because I knew we were going to do this tasting. I just saw the bottle. I was like, I can't be looking at this every day for the next 2 weeks and not have even taken a sip. So
yeah, we've so before I should mention I have not opened mine yet. Usually I try to open these for the first time on the live stream. I didn't do that for the bourbons, but here we are. I'll pour it. We'll have some time to talk about it, see if it changes in the glass, of course. Why Independence Day? Well, I think for everybody, if you've been a member for at least a few years now, you may have noticed probably 4 or 5 years ago, we were assigned, or I should say we had the opportunity to bottle what am I trying to say here? Bottle offer a US exclusive cask to our members here in the US. Our club has grown a lot, man. In the US, things have been different. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, the opportunity to get a full cask just for American members was something we had to pitch with our colleagues in the UK, and it was very different from sort of how we've operated, which is to share some allocation of every cask around the world. But now it seems like, with the sort of increased interest of Americans for the society, growth and sort of our membership, we've been able to every year now turn to them and say, hey, look, we want more than one. We want, I think we've had like a dozen. So it makes sense, right? Because our club's grown and there's only so many bottles per single cask. But I'm excited for this one because, hey.
I hope I'm not wrong. I'm taking a shot here because I don't actually know the answer. Lawyers say don't ask a leading question if you don't know the answer, but I'm going to take my chance here. Okay. Was that first cask that was brought in that you're talking about for Independence Day? Was that the one that you named?
I didn't name it. I did the pick. There was the
you did the pick
93. Yeah. So we've had a few over the years for Independence Day, and I think it's sort of been our leading because it was one of the first we offer. We got for members the Independence Day themed cask. It was I think it's been one of our strongest ones. But yeah, barbecue and fishnets. It was 93 point. I don't know, forget the number at this point, but that was the one that we started with a few years ago, and we've had since then some sort of again Independence Day exclusive cask. But we've chosen these. Oh, here. GCAP
93 114 George Kaplan.
Yeah, wow, you would think 2019. Okay, that's what I was thinking. So we've had a few since then. Last year was called the Rockets Red Glare. I saw a comment earlier about Tommy JB said number 3, big difference from the 58. Yeah, Rockets Red Glare last year. Anyway, yeah, we've. I'm gonna not continue rambling and bore everybody. Maybe I think actually we did choose the name. I think I chose the cask and Tom and I together came up with the name. So anyway, the theme of these casks are always, of course, Independence Day, but it's not just like here's a whiskey for the birthday of America. It's kind of like what's a good whiskey for the summertime. And so we started with barbecue and fishnets. It was like a really bold Campbellton whiskey in poured cask. And we thought, man, this would go really well with it would like just sampling it. We thought, man, this is incredible for just for grilling out. Like it would go really well with obviously the pastime of grilling and being outside on 4th of July. So we've kind of taken different approaches over the years, and this one we'll see. I mean, I've sampled this, I should mention, a year ago when we made the pick, but it's been that long since, and now to be able to actually see the bottle, have the whole thing ready to go and in the glass again, it's always a different experience.
Should we show everyone else the bottle? Is it that time, or should we keep talking?
Let's show the bottle. So this is it. It's 3. Now my camera, maybe you.
I got you.
Yeah. I have this autofocus thing on. So It's special label again. Cask 3.346. Nothing quite like it. It's kind of a bit of a challenge. We'll see, but it's an 18-year-old Isla cask, and now the celebratory labels are pretty cool, but they don't. There's some information that's left off that you would find on our core labels, but it's 18 years old from a second fill ex-bourbon hogshead, 57.3% ABV. So pretty special whiskey on paper. I think as we see like the interest of Isla whiskey and mature Isla whiskey just through the roof. I'm excited. Well, let me ask you, Charlie, what are your initial thoughts? Like, I guess you've tasted it, but
I honestly don't remember anything about what it was in the glass, though. So I'm coming into this totally blind, aside from remembering that I liked it a lot. Nothing specific.
I think what we'll do, I'm going to open this one up right now. We'll taste this. What I'm excited for, I think we try not to make any judgments before tasting the liquid, but what I'm excited for when I see this on paper is that it's in a pure American oak ex-bourbon hogshead, older Isla whiskey. I love, and I don't get me wrong, I love the style of maturing peated Isla whiskey in some sort of wine cask, particularly like a sherry cask. I love that combination. In fact, we have one right now in our shop, which is still available, which was the Distillery 3 rare release bottle, released last month. So maybe what we'll do is taste this one and revisit that one at the end and sort of make a comparison, because I understand a lot of you at home probably have that bottle or picked up something like it, and we'll do a little comparison.
So I've heard you say at least twice, you don't want to prejudge this one, and it can be for better or for worse. But this one also has been judged in multiple competitions and has done extraordinarily well. So, whether we're judging it or not in blind tastings, where you don't have the stat sheet, it has done really well. That I think when you come into a tasting with an expectation like that, sometimes it can actually have the opposite effect. You've built it up too much and it can be a letdown. So I'm trying to like rebalance. It's almost like the resetting of the karma by acknowledging that this thing is good. So hopefully I'm not setting my expectations too high. But it is supposed to be phenomenal whiskey. I'm super excited. I really want to dive back into this. I don't know, just everything about it screams that it should be awesome. I'm with you. I love getting to try, I call them just like naked whiskeys. They haven't been finished up in a wine cask or in, sherry cask or anything too exotic. You're seeing a lot more. I mean, even the society's done some like IPA cask and just really exciting experiments. But sometimes, especially if something's a little bit more matured, I love just tasting it on its own out of an ex-bourbon or out of a French oak or something.
I'm at that point too. You're right. So this one we found out was scored 95 points out of 100 at the Ultimate Experience Challenge 2023. Also won a gold medal at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. So it has been entered and performed really well in 2 of like the most prestigious spirits competitions in the world. But every time I also say this every time we even having written that email announcing it, every time we win awards, it's great. But I just want to remind everybody that every whiskey we bottle is scored rigorously by our own expert tasting panel in Edinburgh. So the whiskey, by definition, has to pass a certain level of scrutiny even before it goes in the glass. So,
and even just talking specifically about competitions, one thing I didn't really consider, it's obvious when you think about it, but I didn't consider it until I started working in the industry and was in a position where I had to select bottles to submit to competitions. Logistically, especially if you're dealing with single cask, you can't submit everything. You have to give multiple bottles to each competition, and we can't rob our members of that. So we have to select from this great subset which ones we want to put in. And that doesn't mean that these are exclusively necessarily the best whiskeys that we make each year. It's just these are the ones that we had in time or that fit a certain need that we wanted to showcase in competition. So it's not always going to be the best, but at least it's qualified as great.
So let's get into this one. I fully agree. And you've tasted this in the past. I've just knows this. I think this is, my mind is already, the wheels are spinning because I think this is very, very different, first of all, than other Distillery 3 bottlings we've had recently. Immediately, it's a very, very sort of evocative, deep, complex aroma, lightly peated. That's the flavor profile. But for me, I think that's on the money. We talked about this, Charlie. There's some whiskeys that we categorize in the flavor profiles, and they can go either way, especially if it's lightly peated or oily and coastal. This, to me, is right on the threshold, just nosing, first impression, between oily and coastal and lightly peated.
And for me, it's actually not, you may disagree, it's not driven as much by the amount of peat, but by the amount of coastal I'm getting in it. There's so much maritime in this glass for me that's actually more so than the fact that it is lightly peated, what makes me think like, oh, this could go either way. Because I definitely do get peat, and it's a really aromatic kind of like charred fruit peat. Distillery 3 often for me has like grilled pineapple or charred pineapple notes. But it's really fruity and leathery and very coastal.
Yeah, I definitely get that. A big rush of saline. You mentioned grilled pineapples, and as you said grilled pineapples, I was smelling just that. I mean, it sort of triggered the recognition in my mind, but I was thinking like sort of stewed red apples as well. Very, very fruity and aromatic, as you've said. Any real spices? I'm not getting a ton.
No, for me, I'm getting more even florals, like almost delicate, flowery, like almost steep botanicals, which for an Islay, I mean, I guess maybe that speaks to the age, but for an Islay whiskey to be getting such subtle bright floral notes is pretty atypical.
Yeah. Very, very overall, I would say in the category of Isla whiskeys, this is on the very sort of elegant side of the spectrum, if there is such a side. It's not the bold in your face, like the peat smack in the what do they say, like the rush of salt water smacking you in the face. It's a very, very sort of faint coastal breeze, which has me thinking, when we did our first USA exclusive pick back in 2019, the intent there, the setting that we envisioned this would be enjoyed was afternoon or like early evening, palate saturated, something that can hold up to barbecue and everything. This is more for me, just nosing this, sort of after dinner, fireworks, maybe even post fireworks. If you're watching fireworks, come on, we're all American here. You know what I mean? Like it's definitely it's a more tranquil, relaxing thing, or maybe, but challenge that.
I would love this with a fish taco. Okay. I mean, maybe that's sacrilegious because I probably wouldn't actually drink it with a fish taco, but just like those notes to me would go so well together. Maybe with like a mango salsa or something.
Yeah,
that would be superb. Going back into it, I was getting way more bourbon cask notes, which I think again speaks to how lightly peated this actually is, that you're still getting those caramely, vanilla-y notes actually being able to jump out of the glass.
Put the glass up here. You can't really see; it doesn't focus. So this eye tracking, but color-wise, it's pretty like a light amber. I think mine looks darker. Yeah, your screen I think shows a more accurate hue, but mine looks darker just with the other lights behind me. That's classic. Almost 2 decades in bourbon wood. And
I love with our whiskeys with the no color added that like 2 decades, it can be an active cask, and for the most part it's still not super dark. And I just love doing tastings with people who haven't ever experienced that. They're like, wait, you're telling me that's 20 years old? Why is it so light? It's like, well, because that's the color it actually is,
au natural.
Au natural.
Let's taste this real quick. I've seen a lot of great questions come in, but I think maybe just for the flow of this, and also I don't have any more patience, so I want to taste this and then come back to.
I'll let you jump in while addressing a question. The block leaner was asking if this is the lottery bottle we announced today. Yes, this is the lottery bottle. Unfortunately, this can't be available to everyone, anticipating the intense demand it would have. We've done a lottery to be fair to everybody. So make sure that you check that email, click the link, submit your email address to be entered, and for a chance to win this one.
I think they'll probably be good. I don't know. We don't know that's for sure. But I think they'll probably be good odds if you enter. I'm not, of course, there's no guarantees because we have more members and we have bottles available. But I think for this one, I just have a feeling that if you want it, you can probably get it. Please don't quote me on that because again, I have no idea. We've shared the news that this has won a couple awards, and whenever our whiskeys win awards, I do see like a big increase in interest from the membership. But anyway.
252 bottles available.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we got the whole cask, right? We wanted to make sure we secured that. So it's a pretty good showing. You should have a pretty good chance, but yes, this is a lottery bottle.
So cheers. I'm going to give this one a go.
Cheers.
So first of all, right away, much bolder on the palate. I was kind of commenting on how just elegant or delicate the aroma was. It's a really, really big, bold delivery. The peat smoke is, I think, for me, continuous to what you experience. It's pretty light. It's not a rush, like a smack in the face of smoke, but it's a big. I don't know. For me, at cask strength, it's a much bolder whiskey than I anticipated.
I was surprised at the continuity, at least in notes. I think that it turned the intensity, the volume of the flavors up, but it actually had a lot of very strong continuity in terms of the specific taste I was getting that I had on the nose. And then very exciting for me because I love this. It's something I generally find more in like sweet, fruity, mellow drams, but got like the white gummy bears into the finish. There was like a very, I even noticed I was making a face. There's like a moment where it just flipped from being this peat forward, bigger, kind of more intense experience into this really fruity, kind of bright, lively thing going on at the back of the palate.
I'm going straight to water. You know, typically I'm sitting here thinking, you know, when we often open bottles of various peated whiskeys or Isla whiskeys here on the channel, it's usually following a couple others in a sequence. And so this is, I'm realizing this is what I'm saying is like, wow, this is so much stronger than I thought it would be. But maybe I want to just double check that, because it is the first whiskey on the palate right now. So I've immediately added some water to open it up a little bit and see what we have going on here. But man,
it's funny. I just, very often for me when I'm nosing in particular, but sometimes when I'm tasting as well, I get brought back to a place, and I may not even remember specifically what I was drinking, but I'm just back in a setting where I had something else. And I was just transported re-nosing that to Golden Promise in Paris in their cellar, doing like some phenomenally old whiskey tasting with the gentleman down there and my girlfriend Katie. And we just had like one of those legendary nights. And I was just totally transported back there smelling this. It's just got that like old style, that, I don't know, that old style Isla peat, really integrated, so much coastal influence, just beautiful.
Yeah. This is everything going on. It's malty, it's fruity. There is that gentle sort of sea breeze. I've added some water, by the way, and so for me, you know, the water unsurprisingly did its job, and it's sort of calmed down the overall delivery. It's opened up more flavors, getting a little bit more like a lemon seed oil. There's just a natural, like it's more citrusy, a little bit. I'm just on the finish now, a little bit more woody. Of course, typically when you'll add water, you tend to get more fruity notes and woody notes as well. And I'm getting all of that. But everything for me on this one, I'll taste it again, but everything's really well balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's standing out. You know, the cask, the spirit, I think the time. So it's 18 years in a second fill, like Bourbon Hog said. I just think that's like a magic formula. It's 18 years, almost, a couple decades or less in second fill, not like a first fill, third fill. I mean, it's all great, but I mean, just, I think reminding myself of exactly what this is on paper. Like, we see so many of these second fill for this amount of time is just such a beautiful combination that I would say is the unsung hero of the cask selections.
It's a more old school way of doing it. I mean, if you're intending that long extended maturation, a lot of the time you'll want a cask that's not quite as active, so you can kind of get that gradual development, that more extended interplay between distillate and cask. And I actually just last November, I was working with a distillery. I bought a cask from them and had that option if I wanted it to be in first fill or refill. And I plan on aging this thing for 20 plus years. So I asked them to drop that in a refill barrel for me.
Sure.
And I imagine I'm probably one of very few people who chooses that option, but I'm thinking long term on this, and I'd love you have a little bit more control, a little bit more flexibility to monitor with that second fill before the cask really starts to put his fingerprints in the whiskey. You can always pull it if the cask is super active, then it won't really matter as much that it's second fill.
But do you think, okay, let's just say hypothetically, man, this is where things go deep. Hypothetically, let's say aging a whiskey, and of course this changes over time, so this is all simply hypothetical. This is not realistic, but let's say a first fill cask. So for everybody, I'm sure a lot, first fill cask would be like, if it's a bourbon cask that was used to make bourbon, shipped overseas to Scotland, filled with new make spirit from off the Scottish stills, and then bottled. And that would be a whiskey bottled, matured in a first fill cask. Second fill means that whiskey was then dumped, and then that cask was reused a second time in Scotland, technically a third time for whiskey, because if you include the bourbon that was made, but really it's like a third use, but the second fill. Anyway, let's say hypothetically, a first fill cask interacts with the spirit twice as actively as a second fill. So it's like you get the relationship is like 2x. And I'm not saying it is.
It's not, but let's just hypothetically.
Let's say it's okay. So that would mean that in 10 years, hypothetically, if 10 years in a first fill, is equivalent to 20 years in a second fill. Where am I even going with this? Do you think they are the same? Meaning,
No.
Does everyone get my question? What I'm trying to say is like, because I hear this a lot, and I would also say I hear this more about like climates in different regions, because I think there's a lot of claims that in our climate, in our region, a whiskey ages 7 times as fast.
You heard about Taiwan, right? Like 4 years in Taiwan is 30 years in Scotland.
Yeah.
You hear that all the time. And it's like, or you could say the same thing, people using 1 gallon casks versus 50 gallon casks. And I'm exclusively parroting something I have read, but the book Proof, The Science of Booze, it's not whiskey specific, but it's kind of lay people science on alcohol production, aging, maturation, distillation, all of it. And the guy talks about rates of chemical reaction. So there are reactions that can happen very quickly. You think about explosions, right? Now we're going into high school chemistry from two people who have no idea what the heck they're talking about. But like that is a reaction that happens very quickly. And so it releases a lot of energy. There are other reactions that take place very, very slowly. The molecular change actually takes a lot of time. Yeah. And he went through and talked about a lot of the congener influence between oak and ethanol actually can take years. So it actually isn't about surface area contact. It isn't about how much liquid, how much proof, any of that kind of stuff. It's just the actual interaction of the lignin and the ethanol cannot transform in less than X amount of years.
Yeah. Okay. So right. So there's a technical explanation to back up, I think, what I mean. I just asked a leading question because I've always felt, it's like the difference of microwaving something for 30 seconds versus baking something for 20 minutes. Like the temperature might be the same at the end, but the outcome is very, very different. So anyway, we're kind of going off on a tangent with this one, but I found that a second fill ex bourbon hogshead, because think about like the science or the art of it is this. Of course, when this cask was filled, it wasn't planned to be bottled by the Scotch Malt Whisky Society after 18 years. So there was no true objective or goal with that in time. It was just let's fill a cask and deal with it later. But man, I just found that second fill ex bourbon hogsheads, like that size cask, most common for about this amount of time, generally produces, I think, some of the most balanced whiskeys that I've seen. And if that's what you're into, then like, man, I think this is worth it. But I also recognize some people prefer like a more cask driven profile, bolder wood flavors or wine cask. And
Well, we talked about this when we did the festival review, and we talked about the Distillery 64 rare release versus the Distillery 24 rare release. And I'd been asked the question of like, which of these is better? And it's massive oak extraction, appropriately named. If you're someone who really wants that wood forward, the tannins are hyper present, you're getting a lot more of that oak profile, there's no question that's the whiskey for you. Doesn't mean it's the better whiskey. It's just whether people where they like that balance of distillate versus oak influence.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think it's very common for people, maybe such as you and I and everybody in chat. I'm curious to hear your thoughts too, if you're like this, to go down this path of whiskey enthusiasm. And the further you go, there's like a natural tendency to sort of shift away from the bolder cask driven whiskeys and kind of start to seek out maybe balanced whiskeys. Maybe because we finally start learning a bit about distillation, and I don't know, appreciation for whiskeys can change. But to play devil's advocate, so I've gone down that route. But Scott here on our team brought up a good point a couple months ago, and just said name the 10 most memorable whiskeys, or like your 10 favorite whiskeys of all time. And I was like, all right, fine. And I did that, and I realized actually my 10 favorite whiskeys of all time were all pretty active casks. I mean, that blew my mind because I was like, when I reach for something, I don't go for that. So I've kind of, at this point in life, I'm just like, man, there is no better. You know what I mean? It's just.
But if we're going down that route, and I was the outlier in Scott's experiment, so I did not go that way. But this is also the beauty of single cask. Like, I think if you're trying to lump things so categorically together, but all of the things you're referring to are single cask, it could just be that you've tried 10 outstanding casks,
Yeah.
you know, or those had that perfect magic combination. But we're trying, there's no right answer, is what I'm trying to say. It's if you prefer sherry, I totally get that. And there are times that there's nothing else that will suit for me. You know, it's like I could try 10 different drams that are second fill, perfect, beautiful ex-hogshead whiskeys. But if I'm in the mood for sherry, or if I'm in the mood for peat, it's never going to fit quite right.
Yeah. So I want to go, Charlie, just some great questions I saw earlier. George Kaplan asked earlier, question about the picks. Do they get bottled immediately when picked, or are they already bottled, or can they age another year before bottling? In this case, they are still maturing in our warehouse in Scotland, and we'll receive or order different samples and do a tasting of samples. And then, which means, and the time between the cask selection and bottling could be, anywhere from a month to even 6 months. I mean, there's been some instances where it's been longer. For instance, we do the tasting panel experience every year with we usually do with Charlie McLean. Robin Lang did this last year for us, but where U.S. members, maybe some of you have participated in this, but U.S. members can actually participate in the cask selection process. Here, we bring the samples over, and some of those, we have to order the samples. It takes some time to get them, ship them over to the U.S. A couple months can go by, already. And so, if it's a younger whiskey, that time is relatively significant. And then by the time we bottle, it could be like another 6 months later. So that's fun. I mean, that's why I said I've tasted this like a year ago, but it was not exactly this. But I don't think it's changed too much with the amount of time in the wood, Matthew Welch says, "Hi friends, joining late. I heard massive oak extraction and thought."
Always a good idea.
Well done, Matthew Welch. Yeah. So how would you sort of just summarize this whiskey relative to what we were just talking about? Like where does this sit in the realm of?
I'm probably going to further complicate things because I have had the very fine fortune of trying things that were distilled across many decades. And I haven't had much. I've had a couple, but I haven't had much Scotch distilled before the 70s and certainly the 60s. But for me, in my mind, the cutoff is like, there's a style that I can think of up into and through the 70s that just has this different character to it. And a lot of the stuff I've tried from that decade isn't necessarily like 40 years old, right? It might be a 1970s bottle that was bottled in the 80s or something. So it can be more comparable. And this it's not totally there. I don't think I would taste this and be like, ooh, that's a vintage bottling, dusty bottling, but it has a lot of that character to it, even beyond just the cask and the type of profile it has. It just kind of tastes old style, old world, which I generally really appreciate. I love, it's almost like a little bit more balanced. Notes don't really jump out as obviously in a lot of those older whiskeys. They have a different oak character, and again, just parroting. I'm no expert in this, but I asked this question one time and I got a really interesting answer of, the question was specifically geared towards Blanton's, but it applies here. I have a bottle of Blanton's from I think 1993 or 1994, something like that. And when I got it, I tried it side by side with contemporary bottling. And it wasn't that one was better or worse, but there was something very different about how the maturation demonstrated itself in the glass. And so I went and talked to a couple different forums, a couple different people I know in the industry. And the clearest answer I could get, which bringing it back, I promise I'll get there eventually, is that so much of the oak that coopers use today, because whiskey and general spirit wine maturation is such a big business, many of the trees are purpose grown for coopering, and are basically cut down as soon as they are of an appropriate size to be used for a barrel. Whereas in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s, they were still just using a lot of wood that was forested, right? Was found out in nature. So they may be trees that were 100, 200, 300 years old. And the chemical makeup of that bark is very, very different. So really roundabout way of getting to this has some of that character of the wood expression of an older style of whiskey.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of, obviously, I think a common opinion amongst whiskey drinkers is that they don't make it like they used to. And I think, you know, nostalgia probably plays a big role in that. I mean, I've made that claim. I've had makes from, you know, previous era, like, yeah, I prefer that one actually, you know, versus what the distillery is doing today. There's also been, it's an interesting comment about the wood. The intent of the wood reminds me of also like with sherry maturation, seasoning casks with the intention of whiskey maturation as opposed to just making sherry. And I've heard people say they don't make it like they used to, but I've also found that maybe on the new approach on paper, I think can produce a better product, but maybe it's not as romantic. And I see what you're saying, because I totally get the old world vibe to it. And I think you're articulating probably what I'm just experiencing at a very technical level, you know, which is really helpful for all of us. I just poured, for the sake of comparison, a little dram. Sorry, I think that's a wee dram.
A wee dram.
A wee dram for a moment. Oh, come on. Yeah. What a Yankee I am. I poured
It's Independence Day. It's the Independence Day bottling.
I poured a glass of whiskey of my favorite Distillery 3 Rare Release, which is still available in the shop actually right now, to compare it to it. Now, this one, as I recall, was made from a blend of different casks from Distillery 3, but predominantly sherry casks. Is that correct? I should probably, before I go out and speak of the differences.
It's a mix of second fill bourbon. So perhaps one of the casks that came for, you know, this is a single cask, perhaps from a similar lot, but it's those second fill bourbon hogsheads mixed with second fill Spanish oak Oloroso hogsheads.
Yeah. I find this my first impression. Again, I've added some water to both. I got two things going on. Just for comparison, the festival bottling is much bolder. Obviously, the sherry casks create a much richer, warmer, I think, characteristic. For me, the presence of the peat is actually higher in the festival bottling, which is interesting because for the majority of my experiences, I find when a peated whiskey is matured in a bourbon cask, I find the peat to be more dominant than when it's buried in a wine cask of some sort. So it's interesting, just in this particular instance. I mean, this is look, the reinforces that whiskey's a natural product at the end of the day. Of course, you know, one of these is a blend of multiple casks, but just luck of the draw. This new one, the Independence Day Exclusive Cask, the single cask, is more elegant. The peat content is lighter, maybe more refined, but naturally refined again. Whereas the festival bottling is a bolder, more richer, I don't know, more intense whiskey, which, yeah, for what that's worth. One's probably the purest approach. One's more of a new world creation.
I wish I had it on hand, because my memory, which is obviously nowhere near as accurate as you tasting them side by side could ever be, I remember tasting the festival bottling and being like, it's odd that this is in the peated profile to me. This should be in the lightly peated. And to me, this one is like you said, definitely correctly labeled. But I would have guessed that this was the bolder tasting. The bolder tasting of the two. Yeah. I thought that the festival release was very delicate, very light. But I'm just going off of memory from a few weeks ago. So,
yeah, I mean, I think it's Who knows? The experience is, you know, there's a lot going on in both classes here.
Also, we drank that one around the 53
Yeah,
festival release, the
it's
distillery
all.
10
That's a good
release.
point.
So it's like,
That's a good point. It's
yeah.
it's all relative. You're right. Of the peated whiskeys that we tasted together for the festival, it was the lightest by far. You had the 253s, a 10, right? The 210. I'm trying to remember. Yeah,
110, 253s, and a 93. That was surprisingly punchy
yeah,
for,
yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, that's kind of my takeaway is, you know, what we were talking about, and I feel like this can get like real pretentious, but if you're interested in whiskey, so I want to be just call that out because I also think as whiskey nerds, it's easy to get a bad rap, but I think if your desire is to experience, you know, the balance of the distillate and the wood and the time, and I mean that I was just in the environment, but probably the water source, more of nature, the natural side of whiskey making. This is, in my opinion, this Cask 3.346. Nothing quite like it. The one we're focusing on tonight is that whiskey. I think it's the pure representation, or pure expression, I should say. I think the Distillery 3 rare release is, I don't want to use the word more fun because that's totally subjective. But again, it's just bolder, it's richer, it's more in your face. And so the two coexist very well because they're very, very different whiskeys, you know, and I'm not, I mean, I'm just, at the end of the day, like, I don't think it would be, you can't really pick one over the other. I'm just trying to really articulate the differences. And because I think realistically in the class, they're very different whiskeys. You know?
So I'm asking this because I can't actually do it. And I always think this is really fun. One of the fun things with single cask, and we have a great single cask here, I love pouring things from the same distillery, but that have enough variance where if someone is trying them blind, they may not immediately know that they're from the same distillery. And so just from my memory, from the slightly different cask variations, you know, is this an instance where you think if you poured them blind for someone and they tried both of them, and then you're like, these are the same distillery, they are the same age, they are very tightly controlled. Do you think people would be surprised to learn that? Or are they more like they're variations on the theme than they are really different?
That's a good question. I mean, we all can't speak for everybody else's palate and experience, but
Of course,
knowing what they are, you know, I would say yes. Meaning to say, I don't think I would be terribly surprised to be told they're both from Distillery 3. They're both of similar age. You know, I think maybe for the festival bottling, I could be convinced that it's because how old is that one?
also 18.
Oh, both. Okay, so they're both 18. I could probably be convinced that that's younger because I think it's easier to emulate age or time in wood with like wine casks. You know, it's easier to lose that. So if you told me that was a 12-year-old, I would believe it. But if you told me that was a 22-year-old, I would believe it. You know what I mean? So that's with the wine casks.
It makes it, yeah. It's not that it's, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to rephrase, I wouldn't say it's easier to emulate the maturation of age. It's just when you use that type of cask, it can make it more difficult to discern what the age is.
Yeah. And that's your question. It's like, really, if it's in a blind presentation, it's like, man, I mean, I can play guitar, so I think of it this way. Like, one is an acoustic guitar. That's the one we're tasting tonight. The festival one is electric guitar with effects and distortion. And like, that's, at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's really easy to mask things, like poor technique.
Whoa.
No, but I'm just saying, like, with electric guitar, like it's I don't know, you're on the spotlight with an acoustic guitar. You can't hide anything. There's no delay pedals. Like, it is what it is, and you gotta like hit every note. And I think this one hits every note, which is what we can conclude on that. But I'm not saying the festival bottling is like a lesser whiskey. It could be the same quality. It's just what you get. It's harder to really discern like how artistic is this thing, you know, just because of the nature of the influence.
I realize it's, like you said, totally subjective, but I actually really appreciate the use of the term fun. And I use that a lot when I'm describing whiskeys as well, because it's like the way, not tasting them, but the way I would interpret the same thing is like, this is one kind of like you said earlier on. It's not as much of you bring it to the barbecue. You're not like, as it's not one you can socially drink this for sure. Like it is approachable, but if you really just sit down and like focus in on it, there is so much depth to this whiskey and elegance and nuance. And, you know, I can see why fun isn't the first adjective I jump to for this whiskey. Whereas I think that the rare release from my memory, like I said, when we initially tasted it, I was like, I think this is the whiskey out of the festival. So I'm going to bring to this bachelor party, because I think, you know, it's approachable. It has something that even if you're not really into peat, you can probably really like this. It's got a lot going on. It's exciting. It's very vivacious. And this is a little bit more like lower mood energy, a little bit deeper, a little bit more contemplative.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm experiencing as well. And that's, I think the key theme here is, or the common denominator, it's all relative. And I think with these two, I would describe them more as moody whiskeys. That's why I was about to say this one's more fun, but I was like, but it's not like a 9-year-old, or what do we have for the festival for like Distillery 10, you know, like a 60+% strength Isla whiskey and some crazy.
That was a fun whiskey.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like that's what I call fun. I mean, again, everybody has a different definition of a good time. But for a fun whiskey, yeah, these are two serious whiskeys, I would say. And I think this one we're tasting tonight, 3.346, is perhaps more serious, because on a technical level, you know, I think it would pass more tests of the most serious of whiskey enthusiasts.
95 points, Ultimate Spirits Challenge, Gold, San Francisco. I think these are the tests that you're referring to.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that's a good point. So it's what Charlie and I both are trying to say is like, we can judge whiskeys too. We can judge. Yeah, we can score these things. Anyway, that's that. Yeah, both great whiskeys. I think this is fantastic. This is a whiskey, again, I chose it for 4th of July, but it's different from our Independence Day cask in the past, which we kind of focus more on daytime, go down to the beach, grill out, you know, and sort of early evening. This is more of like sort of end of day for me. You mentioned the comment about fish tacos. I don't know where fish tacos, you know, sits in the context of everyone's 4th of July plans, but like you could also you can do this like a late morning dram too, because it's delicate, you know, when your palate's fresher. Maybe that's a better time, or you just have it late morning and then you have it for dinner and then you have it in the evening, and like no one really cares. You know what I mean? But maybe just us. So yeah.
Duke McHale is asking, so is this seriously good? I have to say yes. Ben?
Yeah, this to me is a no-brainer. I mean, I personally, I try to like get my personal bias out of this, but I personally, I think I told you this, Charlie, after the festival tasting, with all these whiskeys we have, I know you're on a different location, but at your home too, with all the whiskeys we have, this is the ultimate first world problem. Is when you want a whiskey, what do you pour? Like, I can't think of a bigger first world problem, or more first world of a problem than that. And I have to tell you, I often reach for whiskeys like this from Distillery 3, because it seems like more often than not, I want an Isla whiskey, but I don't necessarily want a total smoke bomb of a whiskey. I just want something balanced. And this is like within the wheelhouse of what I personally gravitate towards at home.
I feel like if I have my druthers, oily and coastal is what I like most often am in the mood for. And just with the history of what the society has released since I've been in it, it means I end up drinking a lot of Distillery 93 oily and coastals. I love them. That is like one of my bread and butter go-to. When I think of like what is my go-to thing on a given day, it's probably going to be a Distillery 93 oily and coastal 15-year, you know, just so good. I can easily see if I'm like on the fence of whether I want that or I want something peaty. this is that niche right there.
Yeah.
Like it's just got a little bit more Isla going on. It's got a little bit more peat going on, but it's still in that oily and coastal land. It's still got all of that depth, that complexity, those notes where you're like, oh, I know what that is, but I just can't put my finger on it because it's like right outside the realm of common reference. So it takes you in a lot of fun directions. It's got a lot of balance. It's just, I don't know. It's really nice.
Yeah. I want to go back to, there was a question earlier, sorry, from the Whiskey Franco. This is like a whole 30 plus minutes ago. I've been going all over the place. So if you're still around, this is for you. If you, Scotch Malt Whisky Society of America, curious if you all have ever sampled something that inevitably didn't pass the bar and become a bottle that you felt should have. Yes. Well, I have personally participated in cast selections where I've, like I couldn't believe like some didn't get picked. Like I have fallen in love with whiskeys and then realized the group didn't feel the same way and had felt the disappointment. And had gone to Tom, our colleague, who kind of manages our like importation and all logistics, and I was like, Tom, we got to repurpose this whiskey. We have to bring this, and he's like, yeah, absolutely, we have to. And like, so that's happened a few times. I'll tell you guys, if everybody watching tonight, you guys are like the most loyal members and whatnot. But you'll see. Last year I went over to Scotland with a friend, Neil Patrick Harris. You've probably seen around. His 50th birthday is today, so
hey, happy birthday, Neil Patrick Harris.
But you'll find out soon. I think we did pick some exclusive casks, which will be releasing in a couple months or late summer, early fall. And we started with 6 samples and chose 3. And I gotta tell you, man, all 6 were fucking amazing. Like they were so good. And like he picked 3, and I'm like, I'm happy. You have those 3. But there was another one in there. I'm like, this is one of the best whiskeys I've had, me personally, and I was like, guys, we have to bring this one to the US too. And so, yeah, that's
are we or no?
Yeah. I think we will. Yeah.
So I've got 2. One is Society, one is not. So I'll go Society first. And I haven't gotten to participate in cast selection, so this is a little bit of a different story, but the first time I went to Greville Street, the members' house in London,
nice, yeah,
they had like 5 or 6 bottles. They were all the same thing on the bar with the original Archives label, but no distillery number on it. And so I was there with a buddy who's also a member. We were like, what's up with that bottle? And they're like, well, we had this cask. We really didn't feel it was good enough to bottle. It just didn't pass the test, but we didn't really know what to do with it. So we just threw it in these bottles. We put the old label on it. It doesn't have any information, but we figured we could just give it to people to try here because why not? We had it, and it's something that's fun, and it'll be in a different label. We tried it, and we were like, why did you not buy? What do you like? Yeah. Can we buy these bottles? This is outstanding. And they're like, oh, it just didn't meet the cut. Like, wow. Okay. This is legit. The other one, which is a story I've mentioned once, and it's similar to your experience, which is so sad. It was not the Society. I won't say which distillery it was, but I was there and was doing a private tasting, and it was I think 25 or 28 year whiskey. And this is from like a top flight distillery. If I said the number, I imagine everyone on this chat would know what the distillery is without having to reference any guides or anything. And I was like, this is one of the most beautiful whiskeys. Best is hard to judge, but like most beautiful, structured, balanced, lush. It's just like, oh, my eyes are like watering tasting this thing. And they're like, yeah, we're going to put it in the most active sherry cask we possibly can, try and like pull all of that sweetness out, get as much color into it as we can, and then we'll bottle it like that. It's just like, oh, that's so sad.
Yeah.
No, it's just different strokes for different folks. But for me, it's like, this is close to perfect.
Oh, I think you've told me that story before. And I think that's the ultimate, that is the sob story of whiskey enthusiasts, to know that something is so I that's worse than saying, we're not going to bottle this one. We're just going to let it mature a little longer, or just it's going to go to another members in another country. Like, at least then I'm like, oh, okay, well, they'll get to enjoy it. But yeah, if you find something and it's going to be, I don't want to say destroyed, but it is effectively killed in its current form when transferred into a different cask, for better or worse, for
It could have
whomever.
ended up better.
Yeah, but but the point is
you
that
know,
experience, will never be had by anybody again. That's more devastating.
it,
So,
wa- it,
as
it
a
was.
lover of whiskey, like,
I'm
yeah,
thrilled I got to try it myself, but it's one of those ones where it's like, oh, I just wish I could share this with somebody, because it's one of those few magical tastings.
yeah. So that's sort of deep dive in this thing tomorrow. There's a link below in the description if you want to enter. I'd give it a go. Again, I mean, if what our interest here is just sharing an authentic experience with you to make the right sort of ordering decisions. If you're a member, you want to pick up a whiskey. So hopefully this conversation provided some context, one of the more in-depth, because you said, Charlie, we've had plenty of time just to talk about one whiskey tonight. So we're really able to go deep into it. I expect obviously interest from members will be pretty high tomorrow. But if you don't, so if you get a bottle, great, enjoy it. Come back to the video, drop a comment. We'd love to hear from you. If not, there are some other great ones right now from Distillery 3. And as we've said, admittedly, they're different experiences. This is a unique time. I feel like the availability of pretty remarkable whiskey is at an all-time high right now. Like I'm just looking at I'm like pulled up my own browser here on Chrome, and I'm just looking at like what's available right now. And I'm like, oh, if you don't get the lottery, I remember a few years ago, like during the pandemic, I'm like, if you don't get this, you'll be devastated and cry. And people said that, but now I'm looking like, you know what? Look what's still available right now. Those 2 casks we have for Father's Day going on. That's amazing. There's so much. The other festival releases still.
Those 2 are. I'm shocked that they're still around. Like when I previewing that Father's Day release, I was like, oh, I guess I won't be able to get those, because we try and leave bottles for members. Like I have more whiskey than I can probably drink in my lifetime. So I don't rush out and buy something. I want to make sure it sits there. And it's like, man, those ones are some of the ones that are shouting to me. The Distillery 66 that came out earlier this month, that's been sitting long enough now. I'm jumping on that. I'm so excited for that one. And then we have the
damp blue peat smoke, that one.
Yeah. That just screams that I need to try that heavily peated Distillery 66 rum cask. Like I'm all about it. And then we have mid-month outturn coming next week. Jenna and I will be previewing that on Monday night, I think. And those are freaking exciting. Super, super exciting. So it's just, I don't know, it's nonstop right now. We just came out of the festivals. Like I was worried there would be some festival burnout, and we just kept the pedal to the metal.
Yeah. I'm looking ahead, not to get too ahead. I mean, this is the only for the mid-month outturn, we'll do that, but there aren't no Islas, right? This is the only one, I think, for the rest of this month, as I understand. But yeah, there's a lot going down, and I think
there is some peat coming, but no Isla. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So Old World Isla, this is it. If you're interested, again, you can enter the lottery below, and I think it's running just for a few days, right? Or the end of this week, presumably. But I think that's that. Charlie, any closing thoughts or remarks?
I actually think I'm going to pour another glass of this one after we jump off, because it is something I'm already wanting to revisit, and I just think, not feel like I need to express what I'm saying. Just let myself kind of simmer in with it. Maybe share a glass with my family since I'm at home, see what they all think. But yeah, I'm already gearing up to try this again, because it just needs a little bit more.
Yeah. It's a good one for sure. All right, Al, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate everybody coming back. A lot of familiar faces tonight. It keeps us really, really interested in doing this, and can justify doing more of these things. So we have a few more streams, I guess, coming up tonight, or excuse me, not tonight, this month rather. I won't get too deep into it, but we'll be back before the month's end, and then we'll move on to July anyway. So thanks for being here. Hope you enjoyed it. And again, click the link below if you want to order a bottle. Enter the lottery first, and best of luck. So
thank you, everyone. Happy Independence Day, and have a good night.